the quiet path, an invitation to stillness in the gentle fading of daylight. When the world begins to settle into the soft embrace of evening, there comes a moment when the soul yearns for something deeper than the day's hurried conversations and urgent demands. This is the moment when we step away from the noise, when we allow our feet to find a different kind of path, a quiet path that leads not through the crowded streets of our daily concerns, but through the peaceful valleys of reflection and rest. Picture, if you will, a traveler who has walked many miles through dusty roads and busy marketplaces, carrying the weight of the day's responsibilities like stones in a heavy pack. The sun is beginning its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in watercolor shades of amber and rose, and this traveler comes upon a hillside where sheep graze in perfect contentment. Their soft bleating carries on the evening breeze like a lullaby, and somewhere in the distance, the gentle voice of their shepherd can be heard, calling them by name, leading them toward green pastures where they will rest for the night. This is where our story begins tonight, in this place of transition between the day's labor and the night's rest, between the world's demands and the soul's deep need for peace. We are all travelers on this path, carrying our own burdens, seeking our own green pastures where we might lay down our worries and find the restoration that only comes in stillness. The shepherd in our story knows each sheep intimately. He knows which ones tend to wander, which ones are timid and need extra encouragement, which ones are strong enough to help guide the others. He has walked these hills for years, his feet knowing every stone, every turn in the path, every place where cool water bubbles up from hidden springs. His voice is weathered by seasons of calling across vast meadows, yet it remains gentle, patient, filled with the kind of love that never grows weary of caring. As evening deepens into the soft purple of approaching night, the shepherd leads his flock along paths they have traveled before, paths that wind through valleys where wildflowers bloom in secret places and ancient olive trees spread their branches like protective arms over the earth. The sheep follow without anxiety, trusting completely in their guide's knowledge of safe places and still waters. There is something profound in this image that speaks to the deepest places of our hearts. In a world that often feels chaotic and uncertain, where we are pulled in countless directions by demands and expectations, the picture of the shepherd and his sheep offers us a different way of being. It reminds us that there is one who knows us completely, who sees our tendency to wander into thorny places, who understands our fears and our needs, and who is always ready to lead us toward green pastures of peace. The psalm that has comforted countless souls through generations begins with these timeless words: "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." In the original language, these words carry layers of meaning that speak not just of provision, but of intimate, personal care. The shepherd is not a distant manager overseeing vast herds, but a loving guide who knows each sheep's voice, each sheep's needs, each sheep's vulnerabilities. To say, "I shall not want," is not merely to speak of material needs being met, though certainly the shepherd ensures his sheep have food and water and shelter. It is to speak of a deeper satisfaction, a soul-level contentment that comes from knowing you are known, loved, and cared for by someone who will never abandon you, never grow tired of your neediness, never turn away when you stumble or lose your way. As we settle into this meditation tonight, imagine yourself as part of this flock, walking along the quiet path as stars begin to emerge in the darkening sky. Feel the soft grass beneath your feet, breathe in the clean air that carries the scent of lavender and wild herbs. Listen to the gentle sounds of evening, the distant murmur of a stream making its way through smooth stones, the rustling of leaves in the olive groves, the occasional call of a night bird beginning its twilight song. This is a place where time moves differently, where the urgent pressures of modern life fade into insignificance, where the ancient rhythms of creation invite us into a deeper way of being. Here, in this place of imagination and scripture, in this intersection of story and soul, we find ourselves welcomed into rest that goes beyond mere sleep, into peace that touches the very core of who we are. The shepherd's staff catches the last rays of sunlight as he pauses on a ridge overlooking the valley where his sheep will spend the night. It is a tool worn smooth by years of use, carved with the marks of countless journeys through these hills. Sometimes it serves as a walking stick when the path is steep or uncertain. Sometimes it becomes an instrument of rescue when a sheep has wandered too close to dangerous places. Always it is a symbol of the shepherd's presence, his commitment to stay with the flock through every season, every challenge, every moment of need. In the growing twilight, the sheep gather close to one another and to their shepherd. There is no fear in their movements, no anxious looking over shoulders for predators or dangers. They trust completely in their guide's vigilance, his knowledge of safe places, his promise to watch over them through the long hours of night. This trust has been earned through countless days of faithful care, through experiences of being led to water when thirsty, to shelter when storms arose, to rich pastures when hunger gnawed. What would it mean for us to rest in such trust tonight? What would change in our hearts if we could lay down our self-appointed role as guardians of our own destiny and allow ourselves to be led, to be cared for, to be watched over by love that never sleeps? The invitation is there, woven into these ancient words that have brought comfort to human hearts for thousands of years. As the first stars appear like tiny lamps being lit across the vast dome of heaven, the shepherd begins to hum an old melody, a tune passed down from his father and his father's father, a song that speaks of faithfulness across generations, of love that endures through changing seasons, of promises that remain steady when everything else shifts and changes. The sheep settle into sleep as this gentle music drifts across the meadow, their breathing becoming slow and peaceful, their bodies relaxing completely into the soft grass. This is the picture we carry with us into the deeper explorations that follow, this image of perfect trust and perfect care, of love that provides not just for physical needs, but for the soul's deep hunger for security and peace. In the chapters that unfold in the hours ahead, we will walk more slowly through these green pastures, we will drink more deeply from these still waters, we will explore the valleys and the high places where the shepherd leads, always with the assurance that we are not alone, never alone. In whatever landscape our lives may traverse, tonight, as you prepare to release the day's burdens and enter into rest, remember the shepherd's voice calling your name with tenderness. Remember the path that leads to green pastures and still waters. Remember that you are known and loved and cared for with a faithfulness that will never fail. Let these truths settle into your heart like warm light, like gentle music, like the promise of dawn even in the deepest night, in the soft grey light of early morning, when dew still glistens on the grass like scattered diamonds, and the air carries the fresh coolness of night's departure. The shepherd rises from his place of watching. He has not slept as his sheep have slept, for his love does not rest, his care does not pause, his attention does not wander even in the quiet hours, when all seems peaceful and secure. This is the nature of true shepherding, this constant vigilance born not of duty but of deep, abiding love. As the first golden rays of sunrise spill across the hillside, illuminating the meadow where the flock has rested through the night, we begin to understand more fully what it means to say, "The Lord is my shepherd." This is not merely a comforting metaphor or a pleasant image for children's bedtime stories. This is a profound declaration of relationship, an acknowledgement of our deepest need and the perfect provision that meets that need. The shepherd knows each sheep's voice, each sheep's personality, each sheep's particular needs and vulnerabilities. There is the young lamb who tends to lag behind, still learning the ways of the flock, still building strength in legs that sometimes tremble on rocky paths. The shepherd's pace adjusts to accommodate this little one, and when the way becomes too difficult, strong arms lift the lamb close to the shepherd's heart, carrying it until strength returns. There is the ewe who gave birth just weeks ago, still protective of her offspring, still recovering from the physical demands of new motherhood. She needs richer grass, cleaner water, more frequent rest. The shepherd guides the entire flock to places where her needs can be met, never grudging the extra time or effort required, understanding that the health of one affects the well-being of all. There is the old ram, grizzled and wise, who has followed this shepherd for many seasons and knows the rhythms of these hills almost as well as the shepherd himself. Sometimes he helps guide the younger sheep, his steady presence a comfort to those who are afraid. Yet even he, in his experience and wisdom, continues to look to the shepherd for direction, understanding that true wisdom lies in recognizing the limits of one's own knowledge. And there are the sheep who struggle with wandering, whose eyes are always drawn to what lies beyond the next hill, who mistake independence for wisdom and solitude for strength. The shepherd watches these ones with special care, knowing their tendency to stray into dangerous places, ready always to go after them when they lose their way, to carry them back to safety on shoulders that bear the weight of love. He makes me lie down in green pastures. These words speak of abundance beyond mere sufficiency, of provision that goes beyond basic survival to encompass flourishing and joy. The green pastures are not just any available grass, but the richest meadows, the places where nutrients are most abundant, where growth and health are most possible. But there is something else in these words, something that speaks to our human tendency to keep moving even when we most need rest. He makes me lie down, suggests that sometimes we must be compelled toward the very rest our souls desperately need. Like sheep who might continue grazing until exhaustion, we often resist the invitation to cease our striving, to stop our endless pursuit of more, better, different. The wise shepherd knows when his flock needs rest even before they know it themselves. He sees the subtle signs of weariness, the slight stumbling that comes when tiredness begins to cloud judgment, the way sheep begin to scatter and lose cohesion when they have been on the move too long without proper restoration. And so he leads them to green pastures not as a reward for good behavior, but as a necessary gift, a provision of love that anticipates need before it becomes crisis. In these green pastures, surrounded by abundance, the sheep are able to eat slowly, to digest properly, to absorb the nutrients that will sustain them on the journeys ahead. They can rest without vigilance, sleep without fear, play and interact with one another in the carefree way that speaks of deep security. The lambs gambol in the soft grass while their mothers watch with gentle eyes, and even the oldest sheep seem to recover something of their youthful energy in this place of provision and peace. He leads me beside still waters. Water is life, but not all water provides the same refreshment. Fast-moving streams can be dangerous to sheep, whose heavy wool makes them vulnerable to drowning if they fall into rushing currents. Muddy pools harbour disease and parasites that can bring sickness to the flock. But still waters, clean and quiet and easily accessible, offer perfect refreshment without risk. The shepherd knows every spring in these hills, every pond that stays clean and fresh, every quiet backwater where the sheep can drink deeply without fear. He has tested these waters himself, has observed them through different seasons to ensure their purity and safety. When he leads the flock to drink, they can approach with complete confidence, knowing that their shepherd's knowledge protects them from hidden dangers. There is something profoundly restful about the image of still waters. Unlike the rushing torrents that can be heard from great distances, still waters speak in whispers, their gentle lapping against smooth stones, like a quiet song of peace. The sheep can see their own reflections in the clear surface, can drink slowly and thoroughly without struggle or stress. As they drink, the shepherd often kneels beside the same water, cupping it in his hands, sharing the same refreshment he has provided for his flock. This is not a distant deity dispensing blessings from afar, but a present companion who participates in the very provision he gives. The water that refreshes the sheep also refreshes their guide. The green pastures that feed the flock also bring joy to the one who leads them there. He restores my soul. These words speak to the deepest level of human need, the place where physical provision alone cannot reach. The soul, that part of us that encompasses mind and will and emotion, that carries our memories and dreams and fears, needs its own kind of restoration, its own form of healing and renewal. Sometimes restoration comes through rest, through the simple gift of being able to cease striving and worrying and planning long enough for inner resources to be replenished. Sometimes it comes through beauty, through the gift of seeing creation's splendor with fresh eyes, finding wonder again in the play of sunlight through leaves, or the perfect architecture of a flower, or the way morning mist rises from valleys like visible prayers. Sometimes restoration comes through community, through the comfort of being part of a flock, knowing that we are not alone in our struggles and joys, that we belong to something larger than our individual concerns. The sheep find healing in their proximity to one another, in the shared rhythms of rest and movement, in the security that comes from being surrounded by others who are also beloved of the shepherd. And sometimes restoration comes through the shepherd's touch itself, through gentle hands that tend wounds we did not even know we carried, that smooth away the tangles and burrs we have accumulated in our wandering, that anoint us with oil that heals and protects and blesses. This touch is medicine not just for the body but for the spirit, a tangible reminder that we are precious, valuable, worthy of care and attention and love. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. The paths the shepherd chooses are not always the easiest or most direct routes to the destination. Sometimes they win through difficult terrain. Sometimes they require more time and effort than seems necessary, but they are always the right paths, the paths that lead to life and health and growth. The shepherd's reputation is tied to the well-being of his flock. When people see healthy, contented sheep, they know something about the quality of care those sheep have received. When they see sheep that are thin and fearful and scattered, they draw different conclusions about their guide. And so the shepherd's commitment to right paths is not burdensome obligation but joyful privilege, an opportunity to demonstrate through his care for the flock the depth of his love and the extent of his wisdom. For the sheep, following these paths of righteousness means trusting even when the way seems unclear, even when the route appears to be taking them away from their desired destination, even when the path leads through challenging terrain that tests their strength and resolve. They have learned through experience that their shepherd sees what they cannot see, knows what they cannot know, understands the landscape of their lives in ways that their limited perspective cannot encompass. These paths are marked not by human signposts, but by the shepherd's intimate knowledge of safe passage through dangerous territory. He knows which routes avoid the hunting grounds of predators, which trails lead to clean water and good grazing, which passages remain safe even when weather conditions change. His guidance is based on love that thinks always of the flock's highest good, wisdom that encompasses both immediate needs and long-term welfare. As the morning progresses and the flock begins to move from the place of rest toward new pastures, each sheep falls naturally into place in the gentle procession. There is no hurry, no anxiety about reaching the destination by a certain time. The journey itself is part of the provision, part of the care, part of the relationship between shepherd and sheep that encompasses every aspect of life together. The youngest lambs stay close to their mothers, learning by observation and imitation the ways of the flock. The older sheep move with the confidence of experience, yet never without attention to the shepherd's voice and direction. And the shepherd moves among them all, sometimes leading from the front, sometimes encouraging from the rear, sometimes walking alongside those who need extra support or comfort. This is the picture that begins to emerge as we unfold the ancient words of the psalm. This vision of care that is both intensely personal and beautifully communal, both practical and profoundly spiritual. In the shepherd's love for his flock, we glimpse something of the love that surrounds us always, the care that anticipates our needs, the guidance that leads us in paths of life, even when we cannot see where those paths might lead. Tonight, as these words settle into your heart like seeds finding fertile ground, allow yourself to experience what it means to be known so completely, loved so faithfully, cared for so tenderly. You are not just one sheep among many in some vast, impersonal flock. You are precious, valuable, irreplaceable to the one who calls you by name and leads you with love that will never fail. In the soft grey light of early morning, when dew still glistens on the grass like scattered diamonds, and the air carries the fresh coolness of night's departure, the shepherd rises from his place of watching. He has not slept as his sheep have slept, for his love does not rest, his care does not pause, his attention does not wander even in the quiet hours when all seems peaceful and secure. This is the nature of true shepherding, this constant vigilance born not of duty but of deep, abiding love. As the first golden rays of sunrise spill across the hillside, illuminating the meadow where the flock has rested through the night, we begin to understand more fully what it means to say, "The Lord is my shepherd." This is not merely a comforting metaphor or a pleasant image for children's bedtime stories. This is a profound declaration of relationship, an acknowledgement of our deepest need, and the perfect provision that meets that need. The shepherd knows each sheep's voice, each sheep's personality, each sheep's particular needs and vulnerabilities. There is the young lamb who tends to lag behind, still learning the ways of the flock, still building strength in legs that sometimes tremble on rocky paths. The shepherd's pace adjusts to accommodate this little one, And when the way becomes too difficult, strong arms lift the lamb close to the shepherd's heart, carrying it until strength returns. There is the ewe who gave birth just weeks ago, still protective of her offspring, still recovering from the physical demands of new motherhood. She needs richer grass, cleaner water, more frequent rest. The shepherd guides the entire flock to places where her needs can be met, never grudging the extra time or effort required, understanding that the health of one affects the well-being of all. There is the old ram, grizzled and wise, who has followed this shepherd for many seasons and knows the rhythms of these hills almost as well as the shepherd himself. Sometimes he helps guide the younger sheep, his steady presence a comfort to those who are afraid. Yet even he, in his experience and wisdom, continues to look to the shepherd for direction, understanding that true wisdom lies in recognizing the limits of one's own knowledge. And there are the sheep who struggle with wandering, whose eyes are always drawn to what lies beyond the next hill, who mistake independence for wisdom and solitude for strength. The shepherd watches these ones with special care, knowing their tendency to stray into dangerous places, ready always to go after them when they lose their way, to carry them back to safety on shoulders that bear the weight of love. He makes me lie down in green pastures. These words speak of abundance beyond mere sufficiency, of provision that goes beyond basic survival to encompass flourishing and joy. The green pastures are not just any available grass, but the richest meadows, the places where nutrients are most abundant, where growth and health are most possible. But there is something else in these words, something that speaks to our human tendency to keep moving even when we most need rest. He makes me lie down, suggests that sometimes we must be compelled toward the very rest our souls desperately need. Like sheep who might continue grazing until exhaustion, we often resist the invitation to cease our striving, to stop our endless pursuit of more, better, different. The wise shepherd knows when his flock needs rest even before they know it themselves. He sees the subtle signs of weariness, the slight stumbling that comes when tiredness begins to cloud judgment, the way sheep begin to scatter and lose cohesion when they have been on the move too long without proper restoration. And so he leads them to green pastures not as a reward for good behavior, but as a necessary gift, a provision of love that anticipates need before it becomes crisis. In these green pastures, surrounded by abundance, the sheep are able to eat slowly, to digest properly, to absorb the nutrients that will sustain them on the journeys ahead. They can rest without vigilance, sleep without fear, play and interact with one another in the carefree way that speaks of deep security. The lambs gambol in the soft grass, while their mothers watch with gentle eyes, and even the oldest sheep seem to recover something of their youthful energy in this place of provision and peace. He leads me beside still waters. Water is life, but not all water provides the same refreshment. Fast, moving streams can be dangerous to sheep, whose heavy wool makes them vulnerable to drowning if they fall into rushing currents. Muddy pools harbor disease and parasites that can bring sickness to the flock. But still waters, clean and quiet and easily accessible, offer perfect refreshment without risk. The shepherd knows every spring in these hills, every pond that stays clean and fresh, every quiet backwater where the sheep can drink deeply without fear. He has tested these waters himself, has observed them through different seasons to ensure their purity and safety. When he leads the flock to drink, they can approach with complete confidence, knowing that their shepherd's knowledge protects them from hidden dangers. There is something profoundly restful about the image of still waters. Unlike the rushing torrents that can be heard from great distances, still waters speak in whispers, their gentle lapping against smooth stones like a quiet song of peace. The sheep can see their own reflections in the clear surface, can drink slowly and thoroughly without struggle or stress. As they drink, the shepherd often kneels beside the same water, cupping it in his hands, sharing the same refreshment he has provided for his flock. This is not a distant deity dispensing blessings from afar, but a present companion who participates in the very provision he gives. The water that refreshes the sheep also refreshes their guide. The green pastures that feed the flock also bring joy to the one who leads them there. He restores my soul. These words speak to the deepest level of human need, the place where physical provision alone cannot reach. The soul, that part of us that encompasses mind and will and emotion, that carries our memories and dreams and fears, needs its own kind of restoration, its own form of healing and renewal. Sometimes restoration comes through rest, through the simple gift of being able to cease striving and worrying and planning long enough for inner resources to be replenished. Sometimes it comes through beauty, through the gift of seeing creation's splendor with fresh eyes, finding wonder again in the play of sunlight through leaves, or the perfect architecture of a flower, or the way morning mist rises from valleys like visible prayers. Sometimes restoration comes through community, through the comfort of being part of a flock, knowing that we are not alone in our struggles and joys, that we belong to something larger than our individual concerns. The sheep find healing in their proximity to one another, in the shared rhythms of rest and movement, in the security that comes from being surrounded by others who are also beloved of the shepherd. And sometimes restoration comes through the shepherd's touch itself, through gentle hands that tend wounds we did not even know we carried, that smooth away the tangles and burrs we have accumulated in our wandering, that anoint us with oil that heals and protects and blesses. This touch is medicine not just for the body, but for the spirit, a tangible reminder that we are precious, valuable, worthy of care and attention and love. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. The paths the shepherd chooses are not always the easiest or most direct routes to the destination. Sometimes they win through difficult terrain. Sometimes they require more time and effort than seems necessary. But they are always the right paths, the paths that lead to life and health and growth. The shepherd's reputation is tied to the well-being of his flock. When people see healthy, contented sheep, they know something about the quality of care those sheep have received. When they see sheep that are thin and fearful and scattered, they draw different conclusions about their guide. And so the shepherd's commitment to right paths is not burdensome obligation but joyful privilege, an opportunity to demonstrate through his care for the flock the depth of his love and the extent of his wisdom. For the sheep, following these paths of righteousness means trusting even when the way seems unclear, even when the route appears to be taking them away from their desired destination, even when the path leads through challenging terrain that tests their strength and resolve. They have learned through experience that their shepherd sees what they cannot see, knows what they cannot know, understands the landscape of their lives in ways that their limited perspective cannot encompass. These paths are marked not by human signposts, but by the shepherd's intimate knowledge of safe passage through dangerous territory. He knows which routes avoid the hunting grounds of predators, which trails lead to clean water and good grazing, which passages remain safe even when weather conditions change. His guidance is based on love that thinks always of the flock's highest good, wisdom that encompasses both immediate needs and long-term welfare. As the morning progresses and the flock begins to move from the place of rest toward new pastures, each sheep falls naturally into place in the gentle procession. There is no hurry, no anxiety about reaching the destination by a certain time. The journey itself is part of the provision, part of the care, part of the relationship between shepherd and sheep that encompasses every aspect of life together. The youngest lambs stay close to their mothers, learning by observation and imitation the ways of the flock. The older sheep move with the confidence of experience, yet never without attention to the shepherd's voice and direction. And the shepherd moves among them all, sometimes leading from the front, sometimes encouraging from the rear, sometimes walking alongside those who need extra support or comfort. This is the picture that begins to emerge as we unfold the ancient words of the psalm. This vision of care that is both intensely personal and beautifully communal, both practical and profoundly spiritual. In the shepherd's love for his flock we glimpse something of the love that surrounds us always, the care that anticipates our needs, the guidance that leads us in paths of life, even when we cannot see where those paths might lead. Tonight, as these words settle into your heart like seeds finding fertile ground, allow yourself to experience what it means to be known so completely, loved so faithfully, cared for so tenderly. You are not just one sheep among many in some vast, impersonal flock. You are precious, valuable, irreplaceable to the one who calls you by name and leads you with love that will never fail. Through valleys and shadows, courage in darkness, there comes a time in every journey when the path leads downward, when the bright meadows and sunlit hills give way to deeper places where shadows gather and the light seems distant and fragile. These are the valleys we all must traverse, the low places where our human vulnerability becomes most apparent and our need for guidance most urgent. Yet it is here, in these very places we most fear to go, that some of life's most profound lessons in trust and courage are learned. The Valley of the Shadow of Death is not merely one location, but a landscape of the soul, a territory we enter whenever circumstances threaten to overwhelm us with their darkness and uncertainty. It might be the Valley of Grief, where we walk in the aftermath of devastating loss, where familiar landmarks of joy and hope seem obscured by the grey mist of sorrow. It might be the Valley of Illness, where our bodies betray us and we discover the frightening fragility of the flesh we have taken for granted. It might be the Valley of Broken Relationships, where trust has been shattered and love has grown cold, where we wander through the wreckage of what once seemed permanent and secure. Or it might be the Valley of Failure, where dreams lie in pieces around our feet and we struggle to believe that new beginnings are possible after such devastating endings. There are as many valleys as there are human hearts, as many shadows as there are fears that wake us in the deep hours of the night. But listen carefully to the words of the ancient psalm, for they contain wisdom that can transform our understanding of these difficult passages. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. The promise is not that we will avoid such valleys, not that faith provides some magical immunity from the darker territories of human experience. The promise is that we will not walk through them alone. Imagine the flock following their shepherd along a path that descends from the bright highlands into a narrow ravine, where tall cliffs on either side block out much of the sky. The rocks here are ancient and worn, carved by countless centuries of wind and water into strange shapes that loom like silent sentinels in the dim light. The path is narrow, winding between fallen boulders and around sharp turns where the way ahead cannot be seen. This is precisely the kind of terrain where predators might hide, where dangers could lurk unseen until it is too late for flight or defense. The sheep sense the change in their surroundings, their steps becoming more tentative, their bleating more frequent, as they seek reassurance from their shepherd and from one another. Some press closer to the center of the flock, instinctively seeking safety in numbers. Others lift their heads anxiously, ears alert for any sound that might signal approaching threat. But the shepherd's demeanor does not change. His step remains steady and sure. His voice continues its gentle guidance. His presence radiates the same calm confidence that has marked every mile of their journey together. He has walked through this valley many times before. He knows its hidden paths and secret dangers, its safe resting places and reliable sources of water. What appears treacherous and unknown to the sheep is familiar territory to their guide. More than that, the shepherd has walked through this valley not just as a guide, but as a fellow traveler, not just as one who knows the way, but as one who has experienced its challenges and emerged stronger for the passage. He understands the fear that grips his sheep in this shadowed place because he has felt that same fear, has wrestled with doubt and uncertainty, has known the weight of responsibility for others when the path ahead seemed unclear even to him. The rod and staff that the psalm mentions are not mere tools, but extensions of the shepherd's care, tangible reminders of his presence and protection. The rod is a weapon, a club weighted with authority, and used to drive away whatever threatens the flock. It speaks of power exercised not for domination but for defense, strength employed not to intimidate, but to protect the vulnerable and innocent. The staff is gentler but no less important, a tool for guidance and rescue rather than warfare. Its curved end can hook around the neck or leg of a sheep that has wandered too close to danger, pulling it back to safety with firm but careful pressure. It can reach into crevices where a fallen sheep might be trapped, providing leverage for rescue that would otherwise be impossible. It extends the shepherd's reach, multiplies his ability to care for every member of the flock even in difficult terrain. But beyond their practical functions, the rod and staff serve as symbols of comfort to the frightened sheep. Their familiar weight in the shepherd's hands, their steady presence at his side, their ready availability for whatever need might arise, all speak of preparedness and competence, of love that has equipped itself for every challenge that might threaten the beloved. As the flock moves deeper into the valley, the path grows even narrower. winding between walls of stone that rise high above their heads. Here the shadows are deepest, the light most filtered and uncertain. Strange sounds echo from the rocky heights above, the cry of hunting birds, the scrabble of small creatures moving among the stones, the distant howl of creatures that hunt in packs and prefer the cover of darkness. Yet even here, especially here, the shepherd's voice continues to offer guidance and encouragement. He calls to specific sheep by name when he senses their particular fear or struggle. His words carry clearly in the still air of the valley, bouncing off the stone walls and returning as echoes that seem to multiply his presence, surrounding the flock with layers of comfort and assurance. Sometimes he stops the entire procession to tend to one sheep whose fear has become overwhelming, whose trembling threatens to communicate panic to the rest of the flock. With gentle hands he strokes the frightened animal's wool, his touch conveying safety more effectively than any words could do. He speaks softly, intimately, his voice a bridge of sound connecting the sheep's isolated fear to his reliable presence. Other sheep gather close during these moments, their own anxiety diminished by witnessing their shepherd's tender care for their frightened companion. They learn through observation that fear is not weakness, that needing comfort is not failure, that the shepherd's love is available not just for the strong and confident, but especially for those who struggle with doubt and uncertainty. The valley teaches lessons that cannot be learned in easier places, wisdom that comes only through the experience of walking through difficult territory with a faithful guide. Here the sheep discover that their shepherd's presence is not dependent on favorable circumstances, that his care does not diminish when the way becomes challenging, that his voice can be heard even above the sounds of their own fear and the threatening noises that echo from the surrounding darkness. They learn to measure safety not by the absence of danger, but by the presence of their protector. They discover that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to keep walking in spite of fear, trusting that the one who leads them is stronger than whatever challenges the path ahead might hold. They find that the valley, for all its shadows and uncertainties, is still a place where love leads and protection surrounds and provision continues to flow from the shepherd's inexhaustible heart. As we walk through our own valleys, whatever form they may take, we carry with us this same promise of presence and protection. The shadows that seem so threatening, the dangers that appear so overwhelming, the paths that wind through such uncertain terrain, none of these have the power to separate us from the love that guides and guards our steps. The valley of the shadow of death is called a shadow precisely because it is not death itself, but only the appearance of ultimate threat, the illusion of power that cannot actually touch what is most essential about who we are. Shadows may frighten, but they cannot harm. They may obscure our vision temporarily, but they cannot change the reality of the shepherd's presence or the certainty of his care. When morning comes, as it always does even after the darkest night, the flock will emerge from the valley into broader places where light streams down unobstructed and green grass grows in abundance, but they will carry with them the deep knowledge gained in the shadows, the unshakable confidence that comes from discovering that their shepherd's love is truly strong enough to see them through whatever challenges their journey might contain. Tonight, as you rest in this assurance, remember that no valley you walk is deeper than the reach of love, no shadow darker than the light of presence that surrounds you always. The rod and staff that comfort you are not distant promises, but present realities, tools of protection and guidance wielded by hands that will never let you go, never leave you to face the darkness alone, never cease their tender care for your vulnerable and precious heart. A table of blessings, abundance and gratitude, after the narrow passage through shadowed valleys, after the steep and winding paths that tested every measure of trust and courage, the shepherd leads his flock to a place that seems almost miraculous in its unexpected abundance. Here, on a broad plateau, high above the dangers they have traversed, a feast has been prepared that speaks of provision beyond imagination, of love that thinks not merely of survival, but of celebration. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. These words paint a picture so bold, so confident, that they challenge everything we think we know about safety and wisdom. Who would dare to stop for a feast while threats still lurk in the surrounding wilderness? Who would spread a banquet in full view of those who seek to cause harm? only one whose power is so complete, whose authority so absolute, that the presence of enemies becomes merely the backdrop for an even greater display of protective love. The table is not a piece of furniture carried up from the valleys below, but the earth itself transformed into a place of plenty. Here the grass grows rich and thick, dotted with wild flowers that bloom in colours so vivid they seem to have been painted by an artist's brush. Natural springs bubble up from hidden sources deep within the rock, creating clear pools where the water stays cool, even under the warm sun. Ancient trees spread their branches wide, offering shade and shelter, their fruit hanging heavy and sweet for all who would partake. This is abundance that speaks of intentionality, of provision planned long before the need arose. The springs were carved by patient centuries of underground rivers. The trees were planted by seasons of rain and sun and soil that prepared this place for exactly this moment, when weary travellers would arrive in need of restoration. The flowers bloomed not by accident, but as part of a grand design that considers beauty as essential as nourishment, joy as necessary as sustenance. The sheep spread out across this natural banquet hall with wonder and delight, their earlier fears forgotten in the face of such unexpected blessing. They graze with the leisurely contentment of those who know they are safe, who understand that this provision is not rationed or limited but freely given. The lambs play among the flowers while their mothers eat slowly, thoroughly, their bodies absorbing not just nutrients but the deep satisfaction that comes from experiencing abundance after scarcity. But the enemies mentioned in the psalm have not disappeared. From the rocky crags that ring this plateau, from the dark caves and hidden strongholds that dot the surrounding landscape, hostile eyes still watch. Predators pace restlessly at the edges of the light, their hunger evident in every movement, their frustration palpable as they witness a feast they cannot touch, a celebration they cannot disrupt. Yet their presence only serves to highlight the completeness of the shepherd's protection and the boldness of his provision. He has not eliminated every threat from the world, has not created some artificial paradise where danger cannot exist. Instead, he has demonstrated that his care is stronger than any enemy, his love more powerful than any force that might seek to harm those under his protection. The shepherd moves among his flock with the relaxed confidence of one who knows that every contingency has been anticipated, every possible threat already addressed. His rod lies easily within reach. His staff remains ready for immediate use, but there is no tension in his posture, no anxiety in his movements. He participates in the feast he has provided, sharing in the joy and satisfaction of those he loves, his own pleasure multiplied by witnessing their delight. This is the nature of true power, not the nervous tyranny of those who rule through fear, constantly looking over their shoulders for the next challenge to their authority, but the quiet strength of those whose love has made them unshakable, whose commitment to the well-being of others has become the foundation of their own security. As the afternoon light slants golden across the plateau, the shepherd approaches each member of his flock with a vessel of oil, anointing their heads with fragrant healing balm. This oil is not mere luxury but practical medicine, a blend of herbs and essences that soothes the cuts and scrapes accumulated during the journey through difficult terrain, that repels the insects and parasites that might otherwise torment the sheep, that seals and protects the wool against the elements they will encounter in travels yet to come. But the anointing is more than medicinal treatment. It is a ceremony of blessing, a ritual of belonging that marks each sheep as precious and valuable, as worthy of honor and special care. The oil is applied with gentle hands that know exactly how much is needed, that work the healing balm into places where it will do the most good. The touch itself becomes part of the medicine, conveying through physical contact the reality of love that encompasses both body and spirit. One by one, each sheep receives this personal attention from their shepherd. He looks into their eyes as he anoints them, seeing not just their physical condition but the state of their inner being. Some require extra oil for wounds that run deeper than surface scratches. Others need the security of prolonged contact, the assurance that comes from unhurried attention. The shepherd's care adjusts to each individual need, his touch speaking a language of love that transcends words. The cup mentioned in the psalm appears here not as a drinking vessel, but as the natural abundance that surrounds the flock on every side. The pools of spring water are so full they overflow their rocky boundaries, creating little streams that meander across the plateau, watering the grass and flowers, creating an ongoing music of plenty that serves as background to the feast. The trees hang so heavy with fruit that branches bend toward the earth, offering their gifts at the perfect height for grateful recipients. This overflowing speaks of provision that goes beyond mere adequacy to encompass true abundance. Blessing that multiplies rather than diminishes when it is shared. Love that grows stronger rather than weaker the more it is expressed. The shepherd's resources are not limited by scarcity thinking or competitive hoarding. His joy increases with every sheep that finds satisfaction at his table. His own sense of fulfillment deepened by the contentment he sees reflected in every face around him. As evening approaches and the first stars begin to appear in the deepening sky, the flock gathers closer together, not from fear now, but from the natural desire for community that comes after experiencing shared blessing. They rest in the sweet grass with bellies full and hearts content, their wool gleaming with the oil of anointing, their spirits refreshed by the demonstration of love that has exceeded every expectation. The enemies that watch from the surrounding heights have gradually withdrawn as darkness falls, unable to sustain their vigil in the face of such confident celebration, unwilling to remain where their powerlessness is so clearly displayed. They retreat to their caves and hiding places, leaving the plateau to those who belong there, those who have been invited to feast at the table of blessing. In this place of abundance, surrounded by evidence of generous provision and protective love, the sheep begin to understand something profound about the nature of their relationship with their shepherd. They are not merely animals under his care, not just responsibilities he has accepted out of duty or obligation. They are beloved companions invited to share in his own joy, participants in a celebration that reveals the depth of his commitment and the extent of his delight in their well-being. The table prepared in the presence of enemies becomes a symbol of triumph, not through violence or vengeance, but through the simple power of love that refuses to be diminished by opposition, provision that cannot be hindered by threat, joy that shines brighter in contrast to the darkness that surrounds it. This is victory achieved not by destroying enemies, but by rendering them irrelevant, not by eliminating opposition, but by demonstrating a power so complete that opposition becomes merely a backdrop for blessing. As we carry this image into our own experience of God's provision, we find ourselves invited to the same kind of feast, the same celebration of abundance in the face of uncertainty, the same confident joy that comes from knowing we are beloved beyond measure. Our own enemies, whether they take the form of circumstances or people or internal struggles, become the very context in which love's power is most clearly displayed. The table is always prepared, the anointing oil always ready, the cup always overflowing for those who accept the shepherd's invitation to feast. Tonight, as you rest in the awareness of this abundant provision, allow yourself to receive the anointing of blessing, to drink from the cup of plenty, to feast at the table where love has conquered fear and joy has triumphed over threat. The eternal dwelling, rest in peaceful assurance as the feast concludes and the deep satisfaction of abundant provision settles into the hearts of the flock. A new awareness begins to dawn in the gentle twilight of evening. This is more than a temporary respite from the challenges of the journey, more than a brief interlude of comfort before the path continues towards some distant destination. This experience of care and provision, this relationship of trust and love between shepherd and sheep, this belonging that has grown deeper with every mile traveled together, all of this points towards something permanent, something eternal, something that transcends the temporary circumstances of any single journey. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. These words rise from the psalm like a song of confidence that has been building throughout every verse, every image, every promise that has come before. They speak of a future as certain as the past has been faithful, a tomorrow as secure as today has proven to be trustworthy. Goodness and mercy are not abstract concepts here, but living realities, faithful companions that accompany every step of the journey. Imagine them as gentle presences that walk behind the flock, ensuring that nothing precious is lost along the way, that no sheep falls behind unnoticed, that every need is met not just adequately but generously. They are the shepherd's own character made manifest in continuous action, his love translated into practical care that never takes a holiday, never grows weary, never finds the sheep too demanding or needy for its endless provision. Goodness speaks of blessing that goes beyond what is deserved or earned, favor that flows from the shepherd's nature rather than from the sheep's merit. It is the extra portion of green grass when ordinary provision would suffice, the discovery of sweet water when any water would meet the basic need, the gentle touch that soothes not just wounds but the fears that cause them. Goodness is love taking initiative, reaching out before it is asked, providing before the need is even recognized. Mercy is goodness applied to failure and weakness, love that responds to the sheep's tendency to wander with patient rescue rather than abandonment, to their fearfulness with comfort rather than impatience, to their forgetfulness with gentle reminders rather than harsh correction. Mercy is the shepherd's commitment to work with each sheep. As they are rather than demanding, they become something different before they can receive care. Together, goodness and mercy create an atmosphere of safety that surrounds the flock like an invisible but impermeable boundary. They follow the sheep not as guards who must be constantly vigilant against escape, but as friends whose presence is so reliable it can be counted upon without thought, so natural it becomes part of the landscape of daily life. This following presence ensures that the sheep's future is as secure as their present, that tomorrow's provision is as certain as today's has been abundant. There will be other journeys ahead, other valleys to traverse, other mountains to climb. There will be seasons of plenty and seasons of scarcity, times when the grass grows thick and sweet and times when careful searching is required to find adequate nourishment. But through all of these changing circumstances, goodness and mercy will continue their faithful attendance, ensuring that love's provision never fails even when external conditions vary. The house of the Lord that the psalm envisions is not a building constructed of stone and timber, not a temporary shelter that might be damaged by storms or worn down by the passage of time. It is something far more permanent and secure, a dwelling place created by relationship itself, a home built from the bonds of love that have grown stronger through shared experience, a refuge constructed from the shepherd's unshakable commitment to those who trust in his care. In this house there are rooms for every sheep, spaces perfectly designed to meet each one's particular needs and preferences. The lamb who loves to play finds areas where joy can flourish without restraint. The older sheep who values quiet discover corners where peace reigns undisturbed. The sheep who struggled with fear in the valleys finds walls so strong that no threat can penetrate, windows so clear that light streams in from every direction. This is a house where the shepherd himself dwells, not as a landlord who collects rent and maintains distance, but as the heart of the home itself, the presence that makes every room warm and welcoming, every corridor safe for exploration. His voice echoes through the halls, not as commands to be obeyed, but as invitations to come closer, to discover new rooms of blessing, to explore previously unknown areas of his love and provision. The dwelling is eternal not because it exists in some far distant future, but because it is built from materials that cannot decay or deteriorate. Love does not wear out with use. Trust grows stronger rather than weaker when it is exercised. The bonds between shepherd and sheep deepen with every shared experience, every challenge overcome together, every moment of need met with faithful care. Time itself becomes transformed in this dwelling. The anxious urgency that marks so much of earthly life gives way to the peaceful rhythms of eternal security. There is no rushing toward uncertain destinations, no frantic accumulation of resources against an unpredictable future, no desperate grasping after happiness that might disappear at any moment. Instead, there is the deep contentment of those who have found their true home, who understand that they belong completely and permanently to love that will never fail. The seasons continue to change outside this house, but inside there is always perfect temperature, always adequate light, always the right balance of activity and rest, stimulation and peace. The sheep who dwell here find that their own natures begin to reflect the harmony of their environment. Anxiety gives way to trust, restlessness to contentment, fear to confident joy. They discover that they were created for exactly this kind of dwelling, that their deepest needs and desires find perfect fulfillment in this atmosphere of unchanging love. The restless searching that once drove them to wander into dangerous places is replaced by the satisfaction of having found what they were always seeking, a place where they are known completely and loved unconditionally, where their belonging is not dependent on their performance, but simply on their existence as objects of the shepherd's affection. Other sheep continue to arrive at this house, guided by the same faithful shepherd who has brought each current resident safely home. There is always room for newcomers, always space for additional family members to join the household of love. The arriving sheep often carry the dust and weariness of their own journeys, their own experiences of valleys and shadows, their own memories of fear and uncertainty. But they are welcomed not with judgment about where they have been or how long it took them to arrive, but with celebration that they have come home at last. The resident sheep gather around each newcomer with the joy of those who remember their own arrival, their own first taste of security and belonging, their own amazement at discovering that such a place could really exist. In this house there are no strangers, only family members who have not yet been properly introduced. There are no outcasts, only beloved children who have temporarily lost their way, but never lost their place at the table. The shepherd's love creates an atmosphere where every sheep can flourish according to their unique gifts and calling, where diversity is celebrated rather than merely tolerated, where individual differences become sources of richness rather than division. As night settles fully over the plateau where the flock has feasted, as stars emerge in their ancient patterns across the vast dome of sky, the sheep begin to understand that they are already dwelling in the house of the Lord, already experiencing the eternal security that the psalm promises. Every moment of the shepherd's care has been a room in this house, every experience of provision a glimpse of eternal abundance, every demonstration of protection a window into love that knows no ending. The journey that brought them to this place of rest and the dwelling that will shelter them forever are not separate experiences, but part of the same continuous reality. The shepherd who has led them through green pastures and still waters, through valleys and shadows, to tables of abundance, is the same one who will never leave them, never forsake them, never cease to provide the love that makes any place home. Tonight, as you prepare to enter into sleep's gentle country, remember that you too are dwelling in the house of the Lord, surrounded by goodness and mercy that follow you like faithful friends, protected by love that has prepared a place for you that no circumstance can disturb, no passage of time can diminish, no external force can destroy. Rest in this eternal security, sleep in this perfect peace, knowing that you are home, under the shelter. An introduction to Psalm 91, in the deep quiet of night, when the familiar sounds of day have faded into memory, and the world settles into the profound stillness that comes only in the darkest hours, there exists a place of safety that transcends all earthly refuges. It is not a place that can be found on any map or reached by traveling along well-worn paths. It is a shelter constructed not of stone or timber, but of something far stronger and more enduring, the protective love that surrounds us like an atmosphere, that enfolds us like the wings of a great bird settling over its nest. As we transition from the shepherd's care revealed in the 23rd Psalm to the deeper mysteries of protection and refuge found in the 91st, we carry with us the peaceful assurance of those who have learned to trust completely in love's provision. The shepherd who has led us beside still waters and through shadowed valleys now reveals himself as something even more encompassing, a shelter so complete that no storm can penetrate it, a refuge so secure that even the most frightening circumstances cannot touch those who dwell within its safety. Picture a traveler who has journeyed far from home, who has walked through many landscapes and experienced many kinds of weather, who has learned to read the signs that speak of approaching storms. The sky begins to darken with clouds that build like mountains in the distance, their peaks towering high into the atmosphere, their depths pregnant with lightning and thunder and rain that could soak through any ordinary protection. This traveler knows the inadequacy of human shelters when faced with the full fury of nature's power. Tents can be torn apart by wind, caves can flood with rushing water, even buildings can crumble when the earth itself begins to shake. But there is another kind of shelter available to those who know where to look for it, a protection that does not depend on physical materials or human construction, but on something infinitely more reliable. The secret place of the Most High is not a hidden location, but a hidden relationship, not a fortress built on some remote mountaintop, but a fortress built in the heart of trust itself. Those who have discovered this place understand that true safety comes not from the absence of danger, but from the presence of one whose power is greater than any threat, whose love is stronger than any force that might seek to cause harm. To dwell in this secret place requires a kind of faith that goes beyond intellectual agreement or emotional feeling to encompass the total surrender of self-protection into hands that have proven themselves trustworthy. It means releasing the exhausting effort to control every circumstance, to anticipate every possible threat, to build enough defenses to guarantee security through human effort alone. As our traveler seeks shelter from the approaching storm, imagine that the landscape itself begins to change in response to the need for protection. What appeared to be an ordinary hillside reveals itself to be something far more significant, the presence of one whose very nature is refuge, whose essence is safety for those who trust in his care. The hillside does not transform into some visible fortress, but the traveler begins to understand that safety was always present, always available, always as close as the next breath or heartbeat. The shadow of the Almighty is not a patch of darkness, but the cool, peaceful space that exists in the presence of overwhelming power dedicated to protection rather than destruction. Like the shadow cast by mighty wings spread wide above a nest full of vulnerable young, this shadow represents not the absence of light, but the filtering of light through love, the tempering of power by compassion, the focusing of infinite strength for the specific purpose of sheltering those who need protection. Under this shadow, the approaching storm loses its power to terrify. Thunder that might shake the earth becomes merely the sound of power under perfect control. Lightning that could destroy becomes merely the evidence of energy channeled for protection rather than harm. Rain that could flood becomes the gentle provision of water for growth and refreshment. The storm itself is transformed from threat to blessing by the presence of one who works all things together for the good of those who trust in his love. This transformation does not happen because the storm itself changes its essential nature, but because the traveler's perspective is altered by the experience of absolute security. Fear gives way to wonder as the one who is running for shelter begins to understand that shelter was never absent, that protection has been present all along. That safety is not something to be achieved through frantic effort, but something to be received as a gift from love that never sleeps. The secret place is called secret not because it is hidden from those who seek it, but because it cannot be perceived by those who rely only on physical senses or rational analysis. It requires the eyes of faith to see this shelter, the ears of trust to hear the voice of comfort that speaks peace in the midst of chaos, the heart of surrender to rest in security that does not depend on favorable circumstances. Those who have discovered this place often find that others cannot understand their peace in the face of obviously difficult situations. They appear to possess some inner resource that enables them to remain calm when storms rage around them, to maintain hope when circumstances seem hopeless, to radiate confidence even when the future appears uncertain. This is not because they are naturally braver or stronger than others, but because they have learned to access a source of strength that goes beyond human capacity. In this secret place, time operates according to different principles than it does in the world of urgent deadlines and desperate hurries. There is always enough time to receive what is needed, always sufficient opportunity to respond to challenges with wisdom rather than panic, always adequate space for reflection and prayer, and the kind of deep breathing that restores perspective and renews strength. The shadow of the Almighty creates a microclimate of peace that is not affected by the weather patterns of surrounding circumstances. Here it is always the perfect temperature for rest and restoration, always the right humidity for comfort and growth, always the ideal conditions for whatever the heart needs most in any given moment. This is not because external conditions are miraculously altered, but because the presence of perfect love creates an environment where every need is met and every fear is calmed. As the night deepens around our imaginary traveler, now safely sheltered under the shadow of wings too vast to be measured, a profound sense of belonging begins to settle into weary bones and anxious thoughts. This is not temporary accommodation grudgingly provided by a reluctant host, but the permanent welcome of a child coming home to the safety of a parent's arms, the security of knowing that this protection is not based on merit or performance, but simply on the unchanging nature of love itself. The storm that seemed so threatening now becomes part of a larger symphony of power and protection, its various sounds blending into a lullaby of safety that speaks of strength sufficient for any challenge, wisdom adequate for every complexity, love deep enough to encompass every fear and transform it into trust. The wind that howled with apparent menace now whispers of movement directed by intelligence and guided by compassion. The rain that threatened to overwhelm now drums a rhythm of provision and refreshment on the earth. In this place of shelter, the traveller begins to understand that every storm weathered in the past was an opportunity to discover this refuge. Every challenge overcome was a lesson in learning to trust the protection that never fails. The difficulties that once seemed like evidence of abandonment or punishment are revealed to have been invitations to go deeper into the secret place, to discover layers of security that can only be accessed by those who have needed them desperately enough to seek them with their whole hearts. This is the introduction to mysteries that will unfold in the hours ahead, the beginning of an exploration into dimensions of protection and care that encompass not just physical safety, but emotional healing, not just temporary relief, but eternal security, not just individual blessing, but the kind of peace that extends to all who learn to dwell in the secret place of the Most High. Tonight, as you prepare to rest in this perfect shelter, allow yourself to feel the reality of wings spread wide above you, creating a space of safety that no storm can penetrate, no darkness can invade, no fear can disturb. You are not alone in the night, not unprotected in your vulnerability, not forgotten in your need for security and peace. The shadow of the Almighty, refuge and strength in the deepest part of night, when even the stars seem distant and the familiar world has dissolved into darkness and mystery. There exists a shadow unlike any other shadow cast by earthly objects. This is not the shadow that speaks of absence or obstruction, not the darkness that comes from light being blocked or beauty being hidden. This is the shadow of presence so mighty, so overwhelming in its power and glory, that it creates its own unique kind of shelter, a place where perfect strength bends itself entirely toward the purpose of perfect protection. The shadow of the Almighty is the space that exists in the immediate presence of infinite power that has chosen to use its strength not for domination or intimidation, but for the creation of safety for those who are vulnerable, peace for those who are troubled, rest for those who are weary from their struggles with forces beyond their control. Imagine standing beneath wings so vast that their span encompasses the horizon, so strong that no wind could move them, so gentle that their covering feels like the softest blanket drawn up around the shoulders of a sleeping child. To abide under this shadow means more than simply visiting it in times of crisis or remembering it when other sources of security have failed. It means making one's home in this place of protection, learning to live in the constant awareness of safety that does not depend on external circumstances, developing the kind of trust that remains steady regardless of what storms may rage beyond the shelter of those mighty wings. Consider a bird that has spent its life flying through open skies, navigating by instinct and intelligence through all kinds of weather and terrain. Such a creature understands both the exhilaration of freedom and the constant vigilance required to survive in a world full of predators and dangers. But when evening comes and it is time to rest, this same bird seeks the safety of the nest, the security of belonging to something larger and more secure than its own individual strength. Under the shadow of the Almighty, we discover what it means to be both utterly free and completely secure, to experience the kind of safety that does not restrict or confine, but actually enables greater courage and more authentic expression of who we were created to be. This shadow does not limit our vision but clarifies it, filtering out the harsh glare of fear and anxiety that can make it impossible to see clearly, allowing us to perceive reality with the kind of calm clarity that comes only to those who know they are perfectly protected. In this place of refuge, strength takes on new meaning. It is not the brittle hardness of those who must defend themselves through constant vigilance and aggressive resistance to threat. Instead, it is the flexible resilience of those who know that their ultimate security rests not in their own capacity to fight off danger, but in their connection to power so complete that it can afford to be infinitely gentle, so secure that it never needs to prove itself through displays of force. The fortress mentioned in the psalm is not built of stone and mortar, but of something far more durable, the unshakable character of one whose love never fails, whose promises never prove empty, whose commitment to the well-being of those who trust in him never wavers, even slightly. This fortress has no weak points that can be exploited by enemies, no supplies that can be cut off by siege, no defenses that can be worn down by persistent attack. Those who make this fortress their dwelling place often find that their understanding of strength itself begins to change. They discover that true power is not displayed through the ability to impose one's will on others or to resist all influence from outside sources. Instead, they learn that the greatest strength comes from the capacity to remain loving in the face of hatred, peaceful in the presence of chaos, hopeful when circumstances argue for despair. This transformation happens gradually as trust deepens through repeated experiences of faithfulness, as confidence grows through countless demonstrations of reliable care. Each challenge weathered in the shadow of the Almighty becomes not just a survived difficulty, but a deeper revelation of the protection that never fails, the strength that is always available, the love that covers every vulnerability with perfect security. The shadow itself becomes a teacher, its quality of light revealing things that cannot be seen in either harsh brightness or total darkness. Here perspectives shift and priorities rearrange themselves according to eternal rather than temporal values. Problems that once seemed overwhelming are revealed to be temporary inconveniences. Fears that once paralyzed with their intensity lose their power when measured against the reality of infinite protection. In this altered light, other people also appear differently. Those who once seemed threatening are revealed to be fellow travelers struggling with their own fears and insecurities. Those who once seemed powerful enough to determine our destiny are shown to be finite beings operating within the same limitations that affect all human creatures. Compassion becomes possible even toward those who have caused pain, because their actions are seen in the context of their own need for the same shelter and security that we have found. The refuge offered under this shadow is not selective or exclusive, not available only to those who have somehow earned it through good behavior or spiritual achievement. It is as freely offered as sunlight or rain, as universally available as air or water. The only requirement for entrance is the recognition of need and the willingness to accept help that comes not as earned wages, but as pure gift from love that gives because giving is its nature. Yet many pass by this refuge without recognizing it, convinced that security must be built through their own efforts, that strength must be developed through their own discipline, that safety must be achieved through their own vigilance and preparation. They exhaust themselves constructing defenses that prove inadequate when real storms arise, developing strategies that fail when confronted with challenges beyond human capacity to control. Those who have learned to abide under the shadow of the Almighty often feel deep compassion for such frantic self-effort, remembering their own years of attempting to create security through accumulation of resources or achievement of position or cultivation of human relationships. Not because these things are inherently wrong, but because they prove inadequate as ultimate sources of the kind of safety and strength that human hearts require for true peace. Under the shadow, time itself operates according to different principles. There is no rushing toward uncertain goals or frantic accumulation against unpredictable futures. Instead, there is the patient rhythm of those who understand that each moment contains all that is needed for that moment, that tomorrow's challenges will be met by tomorrow's provision. That worrying about potential problems only diminishes the capacity to receive present blessings. This does not lead to passivity or irresponsibility, but to the kind of purposeful action that flows from peace rather than anxiety, from confidence rather than fear. Plans are made and goals are pursued, but always with the flexibility that comes from knowing that ultimate outcomes rest in hands far more capable than our own. That our part is to be faithful in small things, while trusting larger things to wisdom infinitely greater than our own. As dawn begins to touch the edges of the eastern sky with the first hint of returning light, those who have spent the night under the shadow of the Almighty rise not with the grogginess of interrupted rest, but with the vitality that comes from deep restoration. They have not simply slept, but have been renewed at levels that ordinary rest cannot reach, strengthened by sources of energy that do not diminish with use, refreshed by springs of life that never run dry. The shadow that has been their shelter through the dark hours does not disappear with the coming of daylight, but remains as a constant reality, a permanent refuge that travels with them wherever their journey may lead. They carry within themselves the knowledge of absolute security, the experience of perfect protection, the confidence that comes from knowing they are never alone, never undefended, never beyond the reach of love that watches over them with infinite care and infinite power. Tonight, as you settle into sleep under this same shadow, allow yourself to feel the reality of wings spread wide above you, creating a space of perfect safety where no fear can enter, no anxiety can disturb your rest, no uncertainty can rob you of peace. You are sheltered by strength so complete it can afford to be infinitely gentle, protected by love so powerful it never needs to prove itself through force. No fear in the night, peace against anxiety. The night has always been humanity's teacher in the classroom of fear, that time when familiar landscapes transform into mysterious territories and ordinary sounds become potential threats lurking just beyond the circle of firelight or lamp glow. It is in the darkness that imagination runs wild with possibilities of danger, when the rational mind struggles to maintain its daytime confidence and the heart beats faster at shadows that daylight would reveal to be harmless trees or friendly furniture. Yet the promise that echoes through the 91st Psalm speaks directly to this most primal of human anxieties. You shall not be afraid of the terror by night. These words do not dismiss the reality of darkness or pretend that night holds no legitimate challenges. Instead, they speak of a transformation so complete that the very time which has traditionally been associated with vulnerability becomes a space of peace, where those who trust in divine protection can rest in confidence, even when they cannot see what lies around them. Imagine a traveller who has walked far from the familiar lights of home, who finds evening falling while still many miles from any village or inn. The path that seemed so clear and safe in daylight now appears uncertain, winding through forests where branches creak with sounds that could be wind or could be something more threatening. In the growing darkness, every rustle in the underbrush could signal approaching danger. Every distant sound could herald the approach of wild beasts or hostile strangers. This traveller faces a choice that every human heart knows intimately: to spend the night hours in sleepless vigilance, starting at every sound and spinning elaborate scenarios of potential threat, or to find some source of security that goes deeper than the ability to see and control immediate circumstances. The decision made in this moment will determine not just the quality of rest, but the fundamental approach to life's uncertainties. Those who have learned to trust in the protection promised in the psalm discover something remarkable about the nature of night itself. What appears to be the absence of light is revealed to be a different kind of presence, a quality of peace that cannot be perceived by eyes accustomed only to solar illumination. The darkness that once seemed empty and threatening becomes filled with the reality of watchful care, with the presence of one whose vision is not limited by the rotation of the earth or the position of the sun. In this transformed understanding of night, terror loses its power not because potential dangers cease to exist, but because they are placed in proper perspective. The wild animals that might prowl through distant forests, the storms that might blow up from hidden horizons, the human threats that might emerge from unknown territories, all of these remain part of the landscape of earthly existence. But they no longer have the power to rob sleep or steal peace from those who rest under protection that is stronger than any earthly threat. The terror by night takes many forms in human experience. Sometimes it is the literal fear of physical harm, the anxiety that comes when we find ourselves in unfamiliar or genuinely dangerous situations where our safety depends on factors beyond our control. Sometimes it is the terror of uncertainty about the future, the sleepless hours spent worrying about children or finances or health or relationships, spinning endless variations of what if scenarios that multiply fear without providing any practical solutions. Sometimes the night terror is more subtle, but no less real, the anxiety that creeps in during quiet moments, when there are no external distractions to occupy the mind, when we are left alone with our thoughts and find them turning toward regrets about the past or fears about tomorrow. This is the terror that whispers lies about our worth and value, that suggests we are alone in our struggles, that insists we must have enough strength and wisdom to handle whatever life might bring without help from any source beyond ourselves. But the promise of protection extends to all these forms of darkness, offering peace that addresses not just external circumstances but internal turmoil, not just physical safety, but emotional and spiritual security. Those who learn to rest in this promise discover that night becomes a time of restoration rather than depletion, of communion rather than isolation, of faith building rather than fear feeding. As our imaginary traveller settles into sleep beneath stars that shine like distant lamps hung in an infinite cathedral, a profound shift takes place in the understanding of safety itself. The protection being received does not depend on the absence of danger, but on the presence of one whose power is greater than any threat, whose love is more constant than any earthly security, whose watchfulness never dims even when human vision fails. The sounds of night that once seemed ominous begin to reveal their true character when heard through ears tuned to trust rather than fear. The wind moving through leaves becomes a lullaby of peace. The distant call of night birds transforms into a song of fellowship among creatures who share the darkness without terror. Even the sounds that might signal genuine challenges, the howl of predators or the approach of storms, lose their power to create anxiety when they are understood to be part of a creation overseen by intelligence and compassion infinitely greater than any force of chaos or destruction. This is not naive optimism that pretends real dangers do not exist, nor is it magical thinking that assumes faith provides immunity from all difficulty or challenge. It is instead the mature peace of those who have learned to distinguish between appropriate caution and paralyzing fear, between wise preparation and obsessive worry, between legitimate concern and the kind of anxiety that destroys present joy while providing no practical help for future challenges. The night becomes a teacher in this new school of trust, offering lessons that can only be learned when the usual sources of security are temporarily unavailable. In the darkness, we discover whether our peace depends on being able to see and control our circumstances, or whether it rests on something more reliable. We learn whether our confidence is built on our own competence and preparation, or on our connection to wisdom and power that never sleep, never fail, never prove inadequate for whatever challenges may arise. Those who pass these nighttime tests often find that their daytime experiences are also transformed. Problems that once seemed overwhelming become manageable when approached with the same trust that made restful sleep possible in uncertain circumstances. Relationships improve when they are no longer burdened by the desperate need to extract security from other fallible human beings. Work becomes more fulfilling when it is no longer driven by the frantic effort to build enough success to guarantee safety in an uncertain world. The peace that conquers night terrors is not a feeling that comes and goes with changing circumstances, but a deep, settled confidence that rests on the unchanging character of divine love. It does not require constant maintenance through positive thinking or spiritual disciplines, though these may be helpful expressions of it. Instead, it grows naturally from repeated experiences of faithfulness, from accumulated evidence that the promises of protection are not empty words but living realities that can be counted on regardless of external conditions. As the night deepens around our resting traveller and peace settles like a gentle blanket over both body and soul, stars wheel slowly overhead in their ancient patterns, silent witnesses to countless generations of human beings who have learned to sleep without fear under their watching light. The same protection that has guarded the innocent and comforted the frightened throughout all the centuries of human history remains available tonight, as reliable as the law of gravity, as constant as the beating of the heart. The darkness that once seemed like an enemy to be fought or endured becomes a friend that offers rest and restoration unavailable in the busy brightness of day. Night becomes nature's invitation to practice the kind of trust that transforms not just sleep, but every aspect of life, the confidence that allows us to release our grip on control and discover the security that comes from being held by hands far more capable than our own. Tonight, as you prepare to enter sleep's peaceful country, remember that you do not face the darkness alone. The terror by night has no power over those who rest in protection that never sleeps, never weakens, never proves insufficient for whatever challenges the hours of darkness might bring. Peace is not just possible, but promised, not just hoped for, but guaranteed by love that has never failed and never will. Angels on the path, protection and guidance. In the gentle hours between midnight and dawn, when the world rests in the deepest embrace of night, and even the most restless hearts begin to find stillness, there moves through creation a presence so subtle yet so powerful that most people pass through their entire lives without consciously recognizing it. These are the messengers of protection, the invisible guardians whose mission is to watch over every step of the human journey with care so meticulous, so loving, that not even the smallest detail of safety or guidance escapes their attention.